Millions of people have been switching to a plant-based lifestyle in recent years.
By 2020, the plant-based movement had hit peak popularity.
An exploding movement of elite athletes are utilizing vegan diets to heal injuries, speed recovery times, and enhance their performance.
This plant-based trend is real. It's here. There's real serious demand.
Beyond Meat, the best performing IPO so far this year, up 100.
The message was clear. This was so of the mainstream that suddenly being vegan was cool. But then enthusiasm began to wane and the movement basically collapsed.
Beyond stock plummeted more than 99%.
So what the fuck happened? Well, today we're going to talk about it. My name is Rich Roll. I'm a podcaster. I'm an author. I'm also an ultra endurance athlete, and I've been plant-based for the better part of 20 years.
My name's Simon Hill. I have a master's in nutrition science. I'm also a podcaster, and I'm the author of the book, The Proof is in the Plants.
So the purpose of this episode is essentially to understand what happened, how we got here, where we go from here, and do an honest autopsy on all the things that contributed to the faltering of this movement. So I'm not sure where to begin. Maybe you have an overarching theory on this, Simon?
I think like most things, there's a multitude of factors. The cultural waters that we're swimming in today feel very different to 2020.
Sure.
And I guess the first thing that I would say from a nutrition science perspective is I don't think the evidence or the science has shifted, but culture certainly has. And I agree with you, the vibe, especially in the media and online, has changed a lot with regards to how we think about a vegan diet, what being vegan means, or a plant-based diet. And certainly a lot of energy has shifted towards more animal-based, carnivore-style diets. I think one of the things that's really hurt the message to eat more plants are stories like Beyond Meat, where there was enormous hype and deep investment into a category of foods, which I think if we're doing an honest audit, we can say to date have failed to live up to the hype. And that category of foods, I think in 2020, we knew that in order for it to compete with meat, it needed to compete on taste and price. And if you look in terms of what's transpired in the last 5 or 6 years, I don't think it's gotten to parity, certainly not on price. If you look at the price of plant-based meat alternatives relative to, say, chicken, which is the most popular meat in this country, we're talking 2 or 3 times more expensive per pound. And we're in an environment now where there's a lot of inflationary pressure. People have less money to spend at the grocery store, particularly low-income households. And at the same time, I don't think these foods created parity in terms of their taste experience. So when you have pressure on household budgets and the food is much more expensive, the taste is not at parity, it kind of makes sense that those products are not going to make their way into the grocery, the shopping cart. And then you throw on top of that the narrative and discussion we've had around ultra processed foods over the last 5 or 6 years, which I think is an important discussion, but there is some nuance and context which is often left out. But I think that explains why a company like Beyond Meat hasn't performed. But what I would say is we have to be careful kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater there, because this would be akin to kind of saying, look what's happened to Peloton. Peloton's stock has tanked, and yet we don't say fitness is over or cycling's over. It's one example of a company whose model hasn't survived in this current environment, and Beyond Meat is that. Yet underneath that, I think the message around eating more plant-based, particularly whole or minimally processed plant foods, being healthy, protecting you from the types of chronic diseases that are affecting a lot of people in this country, in America and in Australia, is just as true and strong as ever, if not stronger, with more evidence being published over the last 5 years.
The way I see it, I agree with you. There's a multitude of factors that have contributed to this situation. But I see it breaking down into three primary categories, all of which you just referenced. One, there have been significant cultural and political shifts that have changed people's perspectives on diet and nutrition. That I consider to be the third. The second is that vegans can be their own worst enemies in the way they comport themselves and carry this message. And the first, and what you were just speaking about, is a lack of honesty and transparency around the health implications of living the plant-based lifestyle and eating a diet that is devoid of animal products. When you look at Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods or Oatly, like, the stock prices of these companies are in the tank. And grocery stores that used to have gigantic sections devoted to plant-based milks or meat and dairy alternatives have shrunk. The appetite for these products has been reduced. And it does have a lot to do with the way that the health benefits or health implications of these products were communicated publicly. And I think there's culpability with the influential members of this movement in carrying that message less responsibly than they could. I think that when you look at them, you can make the argument that they are healthier in the wash in comparison to their animal versions of them. But the communication was presenting them as health foods, when in fact, most of them are pretty highly processed foods. And I think people felt gaslit a little bit, like they're being fed a lie that was pretty transparent. And that led to a breach of trust between the public and the people who were kind of most influential in the movement. And I think that contributed to people kind of breaking up with whatever short-term affair they had or flirtation they had with eating a more plant-predominant diet.
Yeah, I think the phrase that I heard a lot, and I've used it myself, is transition foods for these types of foods. Because if you look at the research on plant-based dietary patterns and these health outcomes, you're right, it's not looking at that category of ultra-processed foods. People in populations of the world that are eating plants and living long lives, they're eating more legumes and beans and lentils and tofus and chickpeas. They're not eating Beyond Burger. They're not eating Oatly. So I think that's a fair summary. That said, I think a lot of the educators in this space have felt that it's unrealistic to get people to give up chicken and red meat and just eat beans and lentils.
Sure. So let's give them a palatable alternative that will acclimate them to this way of eating. But what gets missed in that is the fact that the healthiest version of this way of eating is eating these plant foods closest to their natural state. And then it became all about like palatability. And, you know, everywhere you turn, there was a new like coconut ice cream or like this kind of cookie or cracker or burger or chicken nugget. And these things are tantamount to just eating a fast food diet, essentially. And the idea that you're doing something healthier than you were before isn't actually correct. And when I think about the plant-based lifestyle, there's three on-ramps to this. You can be motivated or incentivized by the ethical considerations, like you would like to opt out of participating in this cycle of suffering that is incident to, you know, industrialized factory farming where billions of animals are slaughtered every year. There are the sustainability and environmental considerations of eating a diet that is a little gentler on the planet. And then thirdly, there are the health reasons. And I think in terms of the health benefits or health implications of this diet, there was some bungling around the messaging on behalf of people who were predominantly motivated by the other concerns, be they environmental or ethical, that created a sort of like, you know, this is good for people and I'm going to contextualize it in a way that is going to make it attractive to them, but isn't exactly completely honest.
Yeah, you run the risk of kind of convincing yourself that I'm going to oversimplify things for the greater good here to the person that's receiving the information. But in the process of that, you're not being completely objective and you lose trust. And more specifically, what I mean there is, and I outline in my book, and of the three things that you just mentioned, the three kind of on-ramps to eating a exclusive plant-based vegan diet, whatever you want to say, the strongest argument is ethical and the sustainable argument.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very hard, impossible to make the argument based on human health alone. When you look at the nutrition science itself, there are a variety of different dietary patterns that lead to great health outcomes. Mediterranean diet, the MIND diet, the DASH diet, vegetarian, vegan, all done in a healthful way with the focus on unprocessed, minimally processed foods can all be very healthy and deliver great health outcomes. And we don't have the definitive research to say that the plant exclusive diet is significantly better than the other ones. And as you say, I think that message was lost in the communication from some folks who their intentions are good. The intention is pure. It is that, they care about the welfare of animals and the sustainability of the planet. So simplifying the message is an easy thing for people to
let's
kind of
reduce
land.
it down to something, that is easy to remember, that's somewhat reductive, but also dismissive of people's legitimate concerns. Like to say, don't worry about B12, don't worry about protein, don't worry about it's all going to be fine. Just do this and you don't have to worry about it isn't exactly responsible or correct. And I think we can both say that based upon our personal experience. You as a scientist and also somebody who's been plant-based for a very long time, and myself as, again, somebody who's been doing this for almost 2 decades and has been an athlete and the like we've lived it.
I also think that there's a level of humility that's required here that just says, look, nutrition science can tell us a lot and we get typical results, average results, but at an individual level, I don't know if a vegan diet works for absolutely everyone. If 100% plant-based works for absolutely everyone. And we can communicate what the science shows in terms of average typical results, but ultimately we shouldn't have someone feel guilty or shameful if they weren't able to get there and they feel better on a plant predominant diet, for example. And so I think some of the communication around absolutes rather than kind of meeting people where they're at and encouraging people to add more fiber, more plants to the diet and find a way of eating that is sustainable while at the same time being better from an animal welfare perspective, gentler on the planet. I feel like that is more empathetic and would be better received by a population.
Yeah. I can cop to some culpability around that. I've never judged people or taken their inventory or shamed them or kind of engaged in that kind of, rhetorical strategy. But I know that I have been reductive in my communication, and I've also advocated on behalf of this lifestyle based upon my personal experience, extrapolating from that. I feel so much better, so then you will too, without fully appreciating the fact that everybody kind of has a different physiology and what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. I think I didn't adequately appreciate that in the way that I have communicated in the past.
I think that's an important share. And I think we can all get excited by how our N=1 experience and want to share it. And the intent is good.
You want to evangelize. Oh my God, this happened. I feel so great. I want everyone to feel this good. Do this and you'll feel the same way. And then somebody does it, they have a different experience. And then your instinct is, well, you're not doing it right. Maybe you didn't do this or you didn't do that. You're going to dismiss their differential as being the result of them not doing it exactly the way that you did, instead of just saying, well, maybe you're different and maybe this isn't going to work for you.
And by the way, that's the same thing that can occur when someone eats a carnivore diet or a keto diet, and they jump on the internet. It applies
across the board.
And they're enthusiastic and sharing about their experience and the results they had in the short term. And so at the same time, that also leaves me feeling kind of understanding and empathetic of that individual and what might promote someone to go online. And the difference between these different types of anecdotes, I bring it back to the overwhelming body of evidence, which is that
that's why you're here.
The dietary patterns, there are anecdotes everywhere we can pull, and there's enthusiasm everywhere. And I think that's great, because underneath that are people wanting to share because they want others to get the benefits they felt. The evidence base tells us that consistently, the people that are doing best over decades are people that are eating these high fiber, plant predominant style diets that are lower in saturated fats and are lower in ultra processed foods.
So the reckoning here is basically owning the fact that a lack of transparency, or perhaps just a communication strategy that includes the nuance and avoids the reductive claims, would have maintained a degree of trust that perhaps would have been better and not left people feeling like they weren't being lied to or misdirected or influenced in a way that was based upon some other agenda that wasn't on the surface.
Totally. I also think, from my seat, and I think it's important on these types of things for everyone to think about, where are you responsible? I feel culpable in that coming into this space, as someone who was a bit younger than some of the people putting information out ahead of me, have found times where I tiptoe around things and haven't really found like the strength in my voice to communicate in response to some of the observations that you've seen, where, in my view, there has been irresponsible kind of education around things like protein or vitamin B12 or eating a very, very low fat plant-based diet, the types of things that can set someone up to fail. So I think there's a space for me to have respectful dialogue about those things, instead of focusing so much of my attention on what is the low carb community doing.
One of the things I hear constantly from people in this community is, I have an idea, but I don't know where to start. To which I say, whatever you imagine is holding you back exists only in your imagination. Let's say you have an idea to start a coaching practice, perhaps a creative project, a business, or a course. Whatever it is, a great way to turn imagination into reality is by giving it a home online. And that is where Squarespace comes in. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform designed to help you stand out and succeed on the World Wide Web we call the internet. You can claim your domain, build a beautiful site, and run your business all in one place. It's actually insane how easy it is, especially when I think about my past experiences working with designers for months at great cost. With Squarespace, you can start with their AI design partner Blueprint, or choose from a library of award-winning super stylish templates and customize everything with simple drag and drop editing. No design skills, no coding required. And if you're offering services, consultations, coaching, events, Squarespace has built-in tools for scheduling appointments, sending invoices, and collecting payments. It's everything you need to turn an idea into something real. Head to squarespace.com/richroll for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code RICHROLL to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. This episode is brought to you by Airbnb, which I use all the time because I travel all the time. And now that I'm back after back surgery, to being very focused on my fitness and my nutrition It's even more important that where I stay be equipped with a nice kitchen to prepare my own meals and also be proximate to a really good gym, which means it's pretty much Airbnb for me all the way, including the trip to DC that I just returned from. And when I was in the airport on my return, watching all the travelers going to and fro, I started wondering about their homes and how many of them were like the one I just stayed at, but just sitting there empty. A few days here, a long weekend there. Those gaps add up and are actually opportunities. If you're already planning to be away, whether it's for an event, work, or just getting out of town, listing your space on Airbnb is a practical way to put your space to use and make some extra income during that time. And here's something else to think about. When big events come to your area, there are often thousands of visitors all looking for a place to stay. Hotels fill up fast and people start looking for something a little more personal, a little more comfortable. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. If you're close to making a switch to an electric vehicle, you probably have a few lingering questions. And they're probably about things like charging, range, how this actually fits into your day-to-day life. I remember being right there. And what surprised me most is how quickly those concerns don't just get answered, they just disappear. Because charging becomes something you do at home, you plug in at night, and in the morning you're just ready. No detours, no stops. With a Rivian, you have more than enough range for everyday driving. And for road trips, the vehicle handles the planning, maps your route, and tells you exactly when and where to charge. And then there's everything else that quietly fades away. Gas stations, oil changes, all the little maintenance things that used to take up time and attention. It's not that you adjust to it, it's just that life gets simpler. And once you experience that, it's hard to imagine going back. Learn more and schedule a demo drive near you at Rivian.com. I too have platformed people on the podcast, these advocates of a plant-based lifestyle, a vegan way of eating, who I later discovered were more motivated by the ethical considerations. These were people who are fundamentally animal rights activists who came onto the podcast or wrote books supporting the health considerations behind eating this way. And that's not so great, like to reflect back and realize like I participated in something that lacked that degree of transparency. And again, these are people that I like, and I think they have the best of intentions. But I think the fact that they decided to communicate a health message that was really kind of a Trojan horse for an ethical message isn't in the best service of the public. Right. Because I think people can kind of know, you know what I mean? And so I've trafficked in that in the past. And in recent years, I've been very careful to avoid that because although I love this lifestyle and I've been thriving on it and, you know, I encourage people to try it, I think the trust that I have with my audience is paramount. And I don't want to participate in platforming somebody that is putting me in a position where that trust is going to get eroded.
Yeah, for example, you know, some of that messaging historically, if we're to make this specific, has been, you know, around foods like dairy all being unhealthy or poison or causing cancer, or all animal protein at any dose being problematic. Mm-hmm. And the reality is when you look at the science, when it comes to dairy, it's very context dependent. The dose matters, the type of dairy, is it fermented? Foods like yogurt and cheese tend to be neutral or perhaps healthy depending on the population. Animal protein itself is such an umbrella term when you break it down. Fatty fish tends to be healthy, neutral. Is it better or worse than legumes? We don't really have a signal there. But the issue is when you overstate it and speak in absolutes that fish is a problem for health, all dairy is a problem for health. And as you say, I think people are quite astute, and eventually the truth surfaces. And when it does surface, hang on, fatty fish could be beneficial or neutral. Some types of dairy aren't poison. Dose matters. then you start to question everything that person was saying. And that's when the trust arose.
Yeah, and that's a setup for the movement to falter, because it can't, when it sits upon a faulty foundation, a foundation of some degree of mistrust, then, it's not going to thrive. And so if you want it to thrive, having a conversation like this is important to, kind of recalibrate people and set the stage for an open and honest discourse.
However, the feedback you get is interesting here, because if you speak in the absolute kind of extreme way, the initial feedback you get is a reward.
Yeah, people
it's long-term. We're seeing the repercussions now, right? But initially, that absolute language was absolutely embraced by the vegan community. And I know from my early days, like even publishing my book, I got email after email from people who are ethical vegans who didn't love my message of context and nuance, because it felt like I was leaving the door open, that I wasn't being firm enough with my language. And through correspondence, I would, where I did have correspondence with these people, I would explain that my job was to convey the nutrition science objectively. But I think the trap is that back in 2020, leading with that absolute language was embraced, and you were kind of platformed and elevated. And so the immediate feedback was positive.
Well, it's the incentive structure of the attention economy. Like, if you want to stand out and get attention, you have to speak in absolutes, and you have to be very definitive in the claims that you're making, and they need to be articulated with great confidence. And the less room you leave for nuance or any kind of defense or retort, the better positioned you are to be an advocate, like the tip of the spear for this movement. So with that incentive structure, of course, we're seeing, and we see it writ large in every category, not just nutrition, people who are making very bold claims about whatever it is with a great degree of confidence. And there's something about that appeals to our amygdala, like our lizard brain likes that. We want complicated, nuanced, messy ideas to be reduced down to something that we can understand, that we're going to remember, and that we can put into practice. It makes our life simpler. It eradicates all the uncertainty, and it makes us feel like we have agency and control over our lives.
Yeah, we're conflating the absolute language with competence in that respect. But the job of a scientist is to convey the degree of certainty and uncertainty. And everything has a degree of grayness.
You know a good scientist when you ask them a question and they say, well, it's complicated, or it depends, or I need the context. What people like is somebody who says, let me tell you what you need to do. Here's all you need to know. Do this. It'll all take care of it. And everything is going to be fantastic. And you know, in your advocacy and in the Proof podcast, like, you have these incredibly sophisticated scientists who are like in the trenches doing all the research. They're deep into the data. And every time they're like, well, it's complicated. If it's this, but sometimes it's this, and we're not really sure about this. And people don't like that. No. But that's science, and that's reality.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right. It's carved me out a niche in the podcast world, but if you look at
but there's trust.
If you look at my listenership, though, like, if we're being completely candid, it's pretty small compared to a lot of the health and wellness shows that we know. And
but if you just made YouTube videos where you were in your kitchen and you're like, here's what you need to eat. If you eat this, you're never going to have to worry about your inflammation, or, you know, whatever it is, like just making these claims with great confidence, like, you could grow a big channel around that. But that's not being honest. That's not what you do. And what you're doing is a service, because you're giving people a way of understanding the science and an appreciation for how challenging these things are. And that should engender trust in the scientific process. Like, these things are complicated. These people have devoted their entire lives to trying to understand this. This is what we know. Here's what is repeatable in these experiments. And so we have a higher degree of confidence that this is true. And these are the things that we're not so sure of.
Right. Let me throw it back to you. Let me try and distill my philosophy in nutrition into something that's packaged up, because I think we can have the nuance and the context conversations, but we also need to deliver something that people can grab a hold of. And I don't think this is that complicated, even though it respects the nuance. Choose a plant predominant diet: Mediterranean, pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan. Base it on minimally processed foods. Try not to eat a lot of ultra processed packaged foods. Low carb, moderate carb, high carb, whatever leaves you feeling best. If you're also interested in the environmental impact of your diet and animal welfare, try to adopt that dietary pattern in a way that is as plant exclusive as possible.
Or you could reduce that one layer down further to what Michael Pollan says, which is eat real food, not too much, mostly plants.
There we go.
Or eat real food, mostly plants, not too much, or something like that. You know what I mean? That kind of encapsulates it. If you need that like really reduced down to its essence message.
Totally.
And within that, like you're saying, mostly they're still not absolutes. You know what I mean? So again, just to kind of recap this fundamental problem, let's try to be a little bit more honest, a little more transparent. I think the fear is like, oh, if we're opening the door, to your point, that's going to leave people like an exit, and they're going to take that exit. But I think if you're actually honest about these things and you treat people, your audience, with respect and with the confidence that they can synthesize this information, you're building that trust, and you're creating a situation in which they're more likely to explore this because they feel like you're an honest broker.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. In the hierarchy of all of this, there was the discourse around supplementation and protein. A lot of hand-wringing over not worrying about protein. You don't have to worry about it. Protein has never been something that I've had to be too concerned about, and maybe I'm just like some kind of hyper adapter or something like that. Like I can work out hard, and it hasn't historically been an issue for me where I have to be hyper vigilant about my protein intake. But I've come to appreciate that this is not the case for everybody. And I think a lot of the messaging at that time was that protein is just something you don't really have to worry about. If you're just grazing on plants, it will take care of itself.
Yeah, the message really was like everything takes care of itself other than B12. You know, even some people may have been saying that you didn't need to supplement vitamin B12, but the reality is, let's just say you start with like a Mediterranean diet, which arguably is in a lot of the dietary guidelines and promoted by a lot of dietitians globally because it's a health promoting dietary pattern that also reduces the risk of nutrient shortfalls. But if you take that pattern and you say, okay, now we're going to eliminate sources of animal protein, there are some things that you need to be aware of. And depending on what you swap the fish and the chicken and the meat for, that will affect whether you're getting enough protein and micronutrients in particular, like omega-3s and iodine and vitamin B12 and zinc. And so I think the message that protein just takes care of itself was oversimplified. I think for some people who work out a lot and are eating a lot of calories and they're swapping the sources of animal protein for legumes, then yeah, probably end up getting enough protein. But if you're removing these animal foods and instead just eating fruit and vegetables, there is a reality of under-consuming protein. So yes, you need to be sensible and eat tofu and tempeh and edamame and chickpeas and beans and lentils and etc. That group of plant foods that are higher in protein are going to be better swaps when you take the animal protein out than eating, more fruit, for example. And at the same time, I think there are a range of micronutrients, many that I just listed off, plus omega-3s, that most people eating a plant-exclusive diet will benefit from supplementing with a multivitamin. Now, it's not everyone, because some people follow their diet very closely and are measuring out the amount of chia seeds and flax seeds that they're having, and are having different types of seaweed for iodine. And sure, those people are strategically getting some of those micronutrients like plant-based omega-3s and iodine, and they may not need to supplement with as much. Mm-hmm. But for the average person who is super busy with work and kids and all the things, when you just shift to a plant-based diet, particularly if it's overnight, a multivitamin is a great insurance policy to make sure that your body has an optimal status of those micronutrients, which are really important and are going to affect how someone feels and are going to affect someone's ability to feel good and want to sustain that diet past 2 months, 3 months, a year, into, you've been following this diet now for 15 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're eating plant-based burgers and plant-based chicken nuggets and plant-based lasagna with some processed dairy alternative cheese and all that kind of stuff, and thinking, well, I'm eating a plant-based diet, I'm eating a healthier diet, this is not a healthier diet. And I think we would have benefited from a little more caution in the communication around not confusing that with what you're talking about, which is eating this plant predominant diet with these plant foods in great diversity close to their natural state.
I think, again, a lot of the educators in the space, because they were coming from the ethical kind of side of this conversation, the assumption was that if you're telling people they need to be aware of protein and that protein's important, they're going to keep eating the animal foods, because society very much sees the animal foods as protein. And we've been having the conversation around, do plants contain protein, and is it incomplete for decades now at this point. So
this coincided with an increase in people's obsession with protein, motivated in no small part by the meat and dairy lobbies, who invested a lot of money in making people concerned about this at the same time.
And I have mixed feelings about that, because, we've spoken about this ad nauseum on this show, but protein is important, and sarcopenia and loss of muscle is a real problem. It's affecting metabolic health. It's affecting physical independence. But if you look at what's driving that in America, it's not a lack of protein. It's a sedentary lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And we don't need to unpack that, because we've done it before and gone through all of the clinical trials. But the stimulus isn't there from the resistance training for most people, which is what's required to build and maintain muscle mass. And the average person has more than enough protein to do that.
Mm-hmm. The problem isn't the protein. The problem is your lack of moving your body.
But over the last, say, 3 years, with this kind of protein obsession that you're talking about, a lot of that message has been a doubling down on the importance of animal protein. And I've pushed back on that a lot, because I think it is a distraction. It's a distraction from, if someone really wants to reduce their risk of sarcopenia and have better metabolic health, they need to start moving their body against resistance. They don't need to be focusing on eating more animal protein because they're already getting enough protein.
Yeah. There's a pretty good chance you've cottoned on to this channel and pulled up this podcast because you've got goals. You aspire to be better, to eat better, to have more energy, to be more consistent. All of this is great, but you got to have an actual plan, or all your good intentions will soon tend to drift. And that is what I appreciate about Prolon. It's a 5-day plant-based nutrition program designed to give you many of the benefits of fasting, but you get to keep eating. It sounds nuts, but it's true. Thanks to the exhaustively studied, evidence-backed fasting mimicking diet devised by world-leading fasting science researcher and friend of the pod, Dr. Walter Longo. Everything comes prepackaged in a gorgeous box, labeled by day. So there's no guesswork, which makes it surprisingly doable, even when life is busy. For me, it's about creating a reset point, a way to step back, recalibrate, and return to my routine with more clarity and intention. Ready for your reset? For a limited time, Prolon is offering my listeners 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/richroll. That's prolonlife.com/richroll to claim your discount and your bonus gift. This episode is brought to you by Momentous. Despite the fact that fiber is absolutely essential to optimal physiology, shockingly, 90 to 95% of people are fiber deficient, which is insane and also creates increased risk for all kinds of things, including heart disease and colon cancer. But Momentous is here to save the day with their new Fiber Plus offering. It's a triple action formula. It's got soluble fiber, it's got insoluble fiber, and it has resistant starch. So thank you, Momentous, for making fiber sexy and for instilling my trust. Because everything Momentous makes is sourced from the purest and highest grade ingredients. It's all rigorously tested. And of course, NSF certified for sport, which is why it's the only brand I purchase and why it's trusted by tons of Olympic and professional athletes. So do your research, but start with reading up on Fiber Plus and more on the Momentous website. You're going to want to upgrade, and you can do that by going to livemomentous.com/richroll, where you can use my code richroll for up to 35% off your first order. All right, let's move on to factor number 2, and that is that vegans can be their own worst enemy. Nobody likes a scold. Nobody enjoys being in the company of somebody who's carrying themselves with an air of moral superiority. And I think the movement has suffered from the fact that so many people who are carrying this message are doing it in an off-putting way that makes people turned off and not want to have anything to do with this.
In some way, the labels create that, don't they? They just create a wall and a division.
Mm-hmm. We all want our community, we want to have an identity or an association with some kind of group that makes us feel like our life has meaning. And I think there is, I would say at the outset, something really beautiful about the ardent animal activist sensitivity. I think some people are born with a higher degree of sensitivity and they just walk the planet like just aghast that this reality is going on all around us and nobody is talking about it. Like, why aren't we doing anything about the fact that billions of these animals are being slaughtered and treated so horribly? And it's so uncomfortable for them that they feel they have no choice but to talk about it. And the fact that like no one else is seeing it the way that they see it or feeling it as deeply as they feel it is frustrating for them, And so when they do their best to communicate it and that message is not received in the way that they would like, it creates even more like anger and resentment, and it becomes this vicious cycle. But the fact of the matter is, this is not an effective communication strategy or campaign strategy. You're not going to recruit people into your cause by taking their inventory and telling them that they're living their life wrong. And so the movement could use a little training in human psychology and rhetoric if it wants to survive and thrive. In other words, if you want people to be interested in what you're interested in, then you have to show an interest in them and stop judging them and pitch a big tent and put out a very big welcome mat and allow people in and model it as aspirational rather than some kind of martyrdom.
Yeah, I mean, this is not my primary area of expertise, but I would say just from a human perspective, we all want to feel understood and heard. And we don't want to feel as though we're being lectured to.
Right.
Or be made to feel that we're wrong and you're right. And so the interesting thing is, though, that you said that it's ineffective. I would agree with you. I think that it is ineffective at scale, but it is effective for a minority. So everyone has the kind of example of where that approach, that more staunch approach, it, quote unquote, has converted some people for whatever reason.
But in the net, how many people is it alienating for the one person that it recruits?
A lot of people.
Sanctimony and shaming is not an effective rhetorical strategy.
No. So what would your suggestion be for the person who is currently finding themselves in that place that you're talking about, where they just feel so frustrated that people are going about their life as if this is not even happening, and are completely disconnected from the food they're eating and where it's coming from? What would your advice be for more effective communication?
Well, the first thing that I would say is I would couch what I just said by saying that we need all types of advocacy. And there's something about the very ardent, like revolutionary, hardcore rights activist that is important and essential in the democratic process, because we need people out there who are willing to show us where the line is and where we've crossed it. I think they play a vital role. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have those people or nobody should be that. And I think if you're wired in a certain way and that's the way you feel most passionate about carrying your message, then you should be that. I'm just saying in the whole, to your point, like, this is not winning hearts and minds. What you're doing is sounding an alarm, and we need to hear that alarm. And we can dismiss it or disagree with it, but those people, whether it's, whatever wrong they're trying to right, this is not just with respect to animal rights activists, with anything that is going on out there. I think these people are vital for a healthy society. So I'm not disparaging them or dismissing them. And certain people are wired for that. And if you're wired for that, then you should go do that. I'm just saying that it's not a great campaign strategy for winning hearts and minds. And if you're thinking about how you want to carry the message or what feels right to you, my way, which suits me and my personality, is to not get into judging people or being alarmist, but to rather model it as aspirational and make it appealing to people so they're attracted to it. Like there's a phrase in AA, which is attraction rather than promotion. Like, don't promote your idea, make it attractive by modeling it in a certain way that makes people want to know more about it. And they come to you, and then you say, well, I'm not out there like trying to convert people, but if you're interested, I'll tell you all about it. And this is how I do it. And this is how I've been able to do these things. And you could do it too. And if you're interested, I'll help you do it. And people feel seen and heard. They feel respected. They don't feel like they're being sold something. They feel like their curiosity is being honored and respected, I guess is what I'm saying.
And there's something to be said about how you leave someone feeling. So, I know that when someone leaves me feeling good and uplifted, and that's the energy that they're bringing to our relationship, I want to spend more time with that person. Yeah. I want to spend more time with that person. I want a bit more of what they have, whereas if someone that I'm relating to is frustrated and angry and upset and bitter and leaving me feel shamed or guilty, it makes sense. Like I'm probably going to want to lessen my time around that person and probably not want to be part of the community or group that they're a part of.
I think you can marry these two sensibilities, like being somebody who has a very strong belief around an ethic, and also is smart and sophisticated on how they communicate that message. And when I think about that, I think about what Billie Eilish is doing. Like, she kind of went viral when she said, you can love animals and you can eat them, but you can't do both. I'm sorry. Like, she's just very clear. This is how I feel about this. And people can be mad or whatever, but that's my position. At the same time, she and Support and Feed, the organization that she has with her mom, is feeding millions of people plant-based meals at some of the biggest concert venues in the world. Like every concert that she plays, they're making these foods available to people as an offering. Like, hey, check it out. It tastes good. Like, we're not telling you have to eat this going forward or you can't eat these other things. We're just feeding you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Without any kind of condition around it. And so not just a big tent, like the biggest tent, a big welcome mat, while also like basically having a lot of clarity around like what you stand for.
She's being unapologetic in her truth.
If you find yourself judging somebody else or attacking their point of view, maybe do a little bit of reflection. Like, we're all flawed and nobody is going to live up to like whatever purity test you set for them. And nobody wants to take that test either. And people want to be, to your point, like around people that make them feel good. And you can make people feel good and seen and heard and honored while also like without thinking that you're transgressing your like moral point of view. So I think it's just a matter of taking that sensitivity, that compassion that comes so easy for the animals, and understanding that human beings are animals too, and maybe channeling that compassion towards the person who disagrees with you. And then finally, I would say, let's stop with the vegan on vegan crime. You know, like the vegans who are attacking other vegans because they're not as vegan as they are or not living up to the, you know, like absolutely impossible to live up to vegan purity test. It's not helpful to see people within the movement attacking each other for not doing it the way that they think it should be done.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are ostracized within the community.
Yeah, so outsiders see that and then they like, well, these people can't even like, they're not even like on the same page, and they want me to get on their page or that page when they're still trying to sort it out amongst themselves. That is not an effective message of attraction. If you got 80% of the population to do meatless Mondays, that's way better than convincing 1% of the population to go 100% vegan. You know what I mean? So like, understand the value proposition at play and know that when you've got somebody who is interested in what you're saying, that person potentially represents sparing animals their lives, and don't, you know, alienate them and destroy that opportunity, because there are stakes to these conversations. And so when somebody isn't you know, entirely on your page, like, find a way to communicate with them compassionately rather than alienate them unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick. Don't be an asshole, and stop being annoying.
Perfect.
So the third and final factor in my mind are the cultural and political shifts that have happened in the aftermath of 2020 and COVID that have changed the landscape and people's perspective on diet. And these shifts are in some part a reaction to wokeness, and veganism is associated with wokeness. And so in order to be red-pilled, you can't have anything to do with veganism. And the last thing any young man or male wants to be called is soy boy. This is like the favorite slur of the red-pilled. And so soy boy became like basically a slur word, an attack. And being vegan became the opposite of masculinity. In order to be a man and be masculine, you had to be eating meat. And there was just no argument to that. And that has become like really an entrenched idea. It's not a new idea, but it has resurfaced with a great deal of strength.
Yeah. That interests me though. The idea that being called a soy boy would threaten your masculinity.
How frail is your masculinity?
I mean, that's pretty fragile, right? That's a construct of masculinity.
Well, it's playing on this idea that masculinity being associated with being the hunter and the provider who's going out into the wild and bringing back the animal and providing for your family, your tribe, your village. This is not how we're living in this day and age. And to the extent that the foods that we're eating are contributing to chronic lifestyle ailments, we're all best to revise our diets and think more consciously about the food choices that we're making and understand that many of these choices are contributing to the detriment of the planet and the environment and a degree of suffering. And we can make another choice. And just because we're eating a different food, it doesn't say anything about who we are as a man.
Yeah.
A man is a provider and a protector. And being a protector means that you speak up for the voiceless and the people that can't take care of themselves.
The meat on the plate it's not the signal that it once was, as you just alluded to. Previously the meat meant hunting, which required some strength and physical fitness and brought security to the tribe. Today, meat means shopping. So hunting, shopping, very different. So it's not the signal. I think that young men today are really struggling with what is masculinity and why is it so hard for them to find a partner, to be a good prospect in the dating market. And they're looking at ways to enhance their kind of their dating success, their viability in the dating market, right? And looking back to the traditional ideals to do that, thinking that it's like to be the provider and the protector, it's things like eating more meat and eating less soy foods. But to your point, I actually think things like physical fitness are important for initial attraction. But in terms of long-term mating, when we use the words like strength and being a provider, a lot of it is actually to do with your emotional capacity. And so much of the conversation right now around how to become more masculine, I believe, is over-indexing on these kind of external signals like eating more meat instead of being the signal. To be a provider and to create safety requires a lot of things we've been speaking about. Can you sit with your friend or your partner and listen to something that they've been through and not make it about you and understand and show them that you understand so they feel seen and not be defensive or reactive. And so if I was speaking to a 20-year-old dude right now who was like, hey, let's just simplify this because sometimes this language can seem a little intellectual. He just wanted to make himself a more viable prospect. Yes, go out and get fit. Focus on your physical fitness, focus on having purpose and drive. But those things are almost commoditized. Like everyone's doing that. The biggest leverage is the emotional capacity, which is what really provides the safety for the partner. Are you emotionally equipped to create that space where she feels heard and seen? And you're not reactive and defensive. And so to kind of bring this back 360, I just think that a lot of the cultural conversation right now around what does it mean to be a man and what can you do right now to be more masculine is slightly distorted. And sometimes those things that I've just explained there can seem kind of soft and feminine or emasculating in and of themselves. But I don't think we have to look at them that way. I think sharpening your ability to listen and to receive feedback and not be defensive and not always want to be right. I actually see that as a skill that's very similar to going into the gym every day.
It's also the white space. Like nobody's doing that. Like people are terrible listeners. People are self-obsessed and they are challenged to just be with somebody else and ask them what's going on with you and be totally present for that answer and not thinking about what they're going to say next. And if you can develop just a modicum of that capacity, it puts you in the top 0.01% of people. So that is a really smart way to think about it. It just doesn't light up the lizard brain in the same way that, the kind of hardcore message that appeals to young men that you're seeing out there. So to drill it down to an example, you're a young male, you're somewhere in a set of circumstances where you look around, you don't see a lot of opportunity, you don't see a lot of potential mates, you're lacking self-esteem, you don't feel like your life has agency, you open up your phone and you start scrolling and you become very vulnerable to the kind of aggressive manosphere message that is telling you, like, you need to go throw around heavy weights. That's fine. You should do that, right? Like, go to the gym. But you need to go out. No one's going to give it to you. You got to go out and you got to claim it for yourself. And here's how you're going to do it. And you're going to be aggressive and you're going to tell people the way that it is. And don't let any of these women push you around. Like, that is fundamentally a message that comes from a place of insecurity, and fear. It's very effective at like selling courses or, kind of entrenching you, in deeper levels of the manosphere. And part and parcel of that whole messaging is like, start eating steak, that just gets woven into that. Like, this will make you feel more primal in your male essence. But essentially what you're saying is true. Like, if you actually want a partner, like learn how to listen, learn how to be with somebody and be curious about them and stop obsessing about like how you're coming off and start thinking about like how that person can feel seen and honored. And you literally are then like in the top tier of male candidates for
and in that process, you're going to become,
and it doesn't matter what you're eating.
You're going to become what's on your plate is irrelevant. You will become comfortable in your own skin. So the insecurities that you're talking about, someone said to me, this was a little while ago, they said like, security, feeling secure in yourself is like the residue. It's what's left over. And so if I was speaking to a young man right now that's like a little bit confused, the thinking outward to whether it's meat or the tribe you align yourself with, or if the girl's attracted to you, or did you get that high paying job, that's not going to bring the security that you're looking for. The security that you're looking for and having high self-worth is going in and saying, who do I want to be? Okay, these are the things that are important to me. I want to be trusted. I want to be loyal. I want to be dependable, accountable. Traits that we would say are strong masculine traits, human traits, really. And then when the rubber meets the road and you get out in the world and you live, are the behaviors, the things you're doing consistent with those? And the bigger that gap, the less self-worth that we tend to have, the more insecurities we tend to have. But as you progress through life and you work at kind of minimizing the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are, then inevitably your masks are coming off.
You're living in integrity.
And when you're living in integrity, you're showing up as someone to others. The way other people are experiencing you when you're in integrity is like, this person's not wearing any masks. They're authentic. And that is attractive.
Incredibly attractive. Much more attractive than whatever your flex is, or the watch that's on your wrist, or, the job that you're talking about, or the car that you're driving. All of those things are masks in and of themselves. And the attraction comes with removing the masks, not layering yourself with more of them.
And it's hard because I think particularly like men haven't had the role models that make a lot of these things intuitive. So the skills that we we've been talking about being a better listener and not being defensive and not trying to be right all the time and just listening to understand, these haven't necessarily been modeled in households. So we're going to fumble. It's not going to be perfect. And at least in my experience, it's having like a degree of grace with that, but also not accepting the same patterns over and over, and like standing strong and being committed to doing better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how over time you start shedding those masks. And, you know, I sit here as someone right now that has many masks to still shed.
Yeah.
And absolutely a huge work in progress, but I can just speak to that as someone that's in it. And I think I kind of wish my 20-year-old self heard that. And so I would have invested more time earlier in my 20s into some of these things.
To bring it back around, like what you're eating is not contributing or antagonizing your identity as a male. You know what I mean? Like that is a red herring and irrelevant. It's no more relevant than the kind of car you're driving or the watch that's on your wrist. But it's incredibly powerful. We just saw this whole narrative around James Tallarico's girlfriend, who apparently is vegan, and now he's being pilloried as, you know, weak. I think Trump called him vegan, and this is a slur word. This is like this can like bury your political career, just being called this word. Because if you want to be a leader, you got to be eating meat, preferably steak. And this conflation of ideas, this conflation of masculinity with eating meat, it's deeply embedded in our culture and very resistant to logically being deconstructed. Like there's something deep within ourselves that holds on to that as true, even though if we look at it even on a surface level, we realize it's kind of nonsense.
I think most of us are moving at such a pace that we're not stopping to kind of deeply examine that. And it is so deeply rooted in culture and society and marketing and now politicians. And so it's accepted at face value.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is the fundamental philosophy of the red pilled is that the institutions are broken and they're lying to you. But this idea that meat is equated with masculinity is basically a talking point of the meat and dairy industry, who wants you to believe that. Mm-hmm. Like they're very heavily incentivized in that idea remaining exactly where it is. And so it's kind of the opposite of being red pilled to like buy into that notion.
I mean, that's interesting in and of itself, because I feel through COVID, I feel like there was and I think rightly so in part, a pushback against control and regulation. And I think the meat industry did a good job of kind of positioning this message of eat more plants as control or overreach from companies and organizations. You know, you'd hear people saying, you know, Bill Gates is investing deeply into plant-based meats.
Yeah, he wants you to be eating all these things.
And the food sovereignty message was attached to meat, not to eating more plants. And so that's another, I guess, piece of this kind of change in culture that has led to that vibe shift where we started this conversation, where certain people have felt that the plant-based community or plant-based message is a very far left message. And is associated with control as opposed to freedom.
But from the perspective of control, who benefits or profits from this idea that meat is equated with masculinity?
Well, the meat industry,
right? And
it's the big meat companies, not the local farmers. And so part of that story, I think, people are led to believe that the food sovereignty message, eating more meat, is supporting local ranchers. But when you dig into it, it's really the big meat companies that benefit. The other thing that I might circle back on here is you mentioned that part of masculinity is protecting the vulnerable and protecting the voiceless. And I would say, I identify with the pursuit of living in a way that is as beneficial for the environment and other animals and other humans as possible. And I find that to be not a weakness or a soft trait, but a strength. And I think it takes temperance and it takes some courage to step aside from what most of society is doing. And I'm not saying, again, I don't think people need to do this perfectly and there's not one way of doing it, but I think questioning that and saying I'm going to have some discipline and strength to make some choices here that I think are not just better for myself, but better for the world around me.
You were talking earlier about adhering to your values, like aligning your actions with your values to live a life in integrity. And so when I think about masculinity and manhood, rather than looking at meat as a proxy for those things on a surface level, instead looking at yourself and going beneath the layers to try to identify what your ethics are. What do you stand for? What's important to you? What are you willing to take a stand for? And then making the hard decisions around your actions to make sure that you're living up to that ethical standard, whatever it is. And this is very much in alignment with the Stoic notion of life, which is essentially that life is difficult and there are going to be obstacles. And being a man means you accept all of these things, you make the difficult choices, and you make the hard choice when it's not convenient. So instead of caving to your cravings or being manipulated by a marketing message that wants you to believe in order to be a man, you need to buy this thing or do that other thing, checking in with yourself and getting very clear, like, this is right and this is wrong, at least to me. These are my rules. And life is going to throw challenges at me where what I want to do and what is consistent with that ethic are going to come into conflict. And the man is the person who does the hard thing and makes the choice they don't want to, that isn't convenient and doesn't feel good, but is consistent with that ethical perspective, because that is what living a life in integrity is. And if you want to be more self-actualized, more integrous, where your actions are in alignment with your ethics and your values, and you know what those values are, and you stand up for them, that is the ultimate flex of strength. And that's a very attractive thing. Somebody who stands up for what they believe in, even when it's not convenient, even when it might irritate other people, or even when it compromises like the thing you really want to do, the comfortable thing, the thing that's going to make you feel good. That is what being a man is. That's what being a self-actualized human is. It's making the hard choice when it's not convenient.
And back to what we were saying earlier about the judging that comes in the vegan community, this is where I think the absolute message of someone must be vegan in order for it to be successful tick. I think what you're talking about there, someone values animal welfare, they value the environment, they also value their health. And so I think the aspiration to eat as plant exclusive as possible, based on looking at those three different things myself, that's where I've landed. And so it's difficult from the outside to judge someone based on the way they're eating, because only they can do that reconciliation. Only they, when their head hits the pillow at night, are they eating as kind of plant-based as possible in a way that leaves them feeling healthy, leaves them feeling nourished, leaves them feeling good in their body, and is also great for the environment. And so to me, that seems like that is the strongest message to communicate outwards, and then let every individual assess what feels right for them and where they land.
All right, so to bring this to a conclusion. Hopefully we've rearranged some thinking around like how to approach this lifestyle or how to conceptualize it. But let's leave people with some practical ways to get started. So if you're encouraged by what you've heard and you're curious about how you might begin the process of eating a more plant predominant diet, what is the best way to do that, Simon?
And I'll highlight, I want people to know you can have the physical fitness and the body that you want and eat in a way that's good for your health, good for the environment, animal welfare. So you can have it all and have your values aligned. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I think sometimes we run the risk of overcomplicating this. It's not eating as much red meat and white meat and processed meat to start with, and instead starting to eat more legumes. What do I mean by legumes? Tofu, tempeh, lentils, beans, chickpeas. And yes, those foods by themselves, like most animal proteins, pretty bland. So season them, use the flavors that you currently like in your cooking, and you can make them taste really good. They're really just a flavor vehicle. You do need to pay attention to protein. So don't just take the animal proteins out and not consider what you're replacing them with. Get 1.2 grams per kilogram at least. If you're really physically active, get 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram and throw in a protein shake in the morning or afternoon after you train, and put peanut butter and whatever milk you're using and berries and dark leafy greens in there. And then all of a sudden that contains another 40 grams of protein and a lot of nutrients. Above that, I think at a high level for someone that's dipping their toes into this, take a multivitamin as an insurance policy. You could refine that later and go more strategic on individual supplements, but start with the multivitamin and a DHA, EPA, omega-3 supplement, which is fish oil or algae oil. That's really as complex as it needs to be as a starting point. And across the week, trying to eat lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds.
That's a good way to start. If you want to get deeper into the weeds, you can pick up Simon's book, The Proof is in the Plants, and tune into Simon's podcast, The Proof, where he sits down with all of these nutrition scientists and they go deep into the weeds on the research and what we know, what we still are trying to find out. Also, you can pick up Finding Ultra, my memoir. In the appendices in the back of that, I have like 50 pages of like how I do it and how I've made it work as an ultra endurance athlete, doing double Ironmans and all kinds of crazy challenges. We also have 2 cookbooks, The Plant Power Way and The Plant Power Way Italia. And I too have hosted many research scientists on my podcast over the years. But you can go back and just search Rich Roll Simon Hill and you'll find the many episodes that we've done. We must have done like a dozen at this point or something like that. So there's plenty there for you, for those who are eager to learn. And the water's warm over here. I would say that Simon has done an admirable job of modeling an aspirational lifestyle. You're very fit and successful and have a beautiful partner. You're in a loving relationship. I've been married for a long time, and I'm a parent with children and running a business, while also acquitting myself as an athlete in my later decades. And so this is not only possible, I actually find it to be an aspirational way to live. And if it wasn't, I wouldn't still be living it.
Thank you very much, Rich, for having me again.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Appreciate you and always appreciate coming on. And I love the feedback I get from your community. So it's a pleasure.
Cool. And to be continued. All right. Peace. More plants.